After 3 playthroughs, 90 hours of playtime, and the grind to achieve that beautifully elusive platinum trophy, it's time to talk about Black Myth Wukong. Needless to say, I like the game. Just a little bit. Even though I did everything I could in Black Myth Wukong, it's still hard to put down and pick up my next game. Plain and simple, this game's good, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a few bumps along the way, or that this game's flawless. With amazing attention to detail from character design, environmental design, deep meaningful systems, and new innovative RPG features, and plenty of strange and yet wholesome cutscenes that range from total zen to what the I went into this game with a lot of expectations, based on gameplay clips and my own assumptions from them. But it was not what I was expecting. Now don't get me wrong, this ended up being a really great unexpected experience, but I thought I was getting a straight up Souls-like, and if you guys have watched any of my content, chances are you might have caught on to me being a big Souls fan, or anything Souls-like for that matter. So my mind was set on that, but as soon as I took my first steps, I knew I was diving into something different. While there are a lot of Souls-like elements such as rest points that reset enemies, and healing gourds similar to Estus Flask but with a very cool twist, but I'll get into that later. The combat was quite different. With no way to block or parry, your primary ways to counter enemies' attacks is your dodge, which incorporates a perfect dodge that allows for a variety of ways to boost your combat, such as exploding clones left behind, or giving you bonus focus to cast your core abilities. These core abilities were also the other way to counter enemy attacks, in a lot of creative ways, from turning yourself into stone, going invisible, or even freezing them in place, causing your strategy to change for each individual fight. Now from my experience, the learning curve was steep, not necessarily in difficulty with the game, which can be very challenging, and it had one of the toughest boss battles that I have ever encountered, but more so in adapting to a new ARPG combat style. I think it took me a good hour for things to start really clicking, and I began to understand how to utilize my focus points to activate harder hitting strikes to really take advantage of different enemies. Now at first I thought this would get boring and repetitive, but between 3 stance styles, each with their own unique way of triggering combos and focus skills, you can really get quite creative with how you fight, as you can change stances on the fly. By the end of it, I was stance swapping and mowing down everything in my path, eventually power slapping my way through my second New Game Plus like a master Wukong. Reflecting back on how I felt on my first playthrough to now, the natural skill progression is absolutely amazing. Most skills can be obtained fairly quick, since the typical souls function of losing your souls to spend to level is not the case here. You can die as much as you want, and you don't have to worry about losing your progress to get stronger. And with an absolutely massive skill tree composed of 3 different sections, every level you gain feels substantial for your power. And beyond that, one of the most unique features about Black Myth Wukong is the collection of spirits. Based off of Sun Wukong's iconic ability to shapeshift, you encounter a ton of unique enemies, and with that, the ability to take on the form of many of them, adding in a crazy amount of ways to add to your combat lineup. And you can tell they took a lot of time making sure the system was done right, considering it's a super iconic trait of Wukong. With just about any type of ARPG combat you can imagine, there's probably a spirit that can do it. From placing different types of affliction on enemies, to ranged attacks, AoEs, buffs, and many more, it made the hunt for them one of the many things that kept the game exciting the whole way through. With a total of 54 unique spirits to collect and utilize, plus beyond that you can collect 10 additional longer duration transformations, each with their own full set of skills and abilities for a true game changer. Now hold on, let's slow down a second. You can see a trend here. The depth of this game is absurd. And while on paper this game isn't an open world, but the amount of off the beaten path content was excellent, with incredible side content and stories that give substantial rewards at every corner. From new abilities, weapons, armors, and even materials to make medicines that can give you game-changing buffs to the Destined One. And that gourd I talked about earlier, well, let's get back on that. I really want to make a point to talk about this, because I loved how customizable it was. You'll find just about everything in Black Myth Wukong has some element of upgrading, but the gourd itself has 3 ways you can change how it works. From upgrading your gourd to improve its effects, as well as collecting unique gourds that vary widely with different effects, and then there are soaks that offer individual buffs, and finally the drink inside. Definitely the most in-depth customization of this traditional method of healing I have ever seen. But even though there may be a goofy amount of ways to upgrade everything you use, from weapons, armor, abilities, and even individual spirits, the beauty of Black Myth Wukong is that you really don't need to dive deep into all these features if you don't want to. You can play through this game with the basic upgrades and simple changes, making this a great game for all types of players. The only issue is the difficulty. They truly did not shy away from making this game a challenge. And I've seen a ton of content floating around people saying they're spending days on just one boss, which for me, I love that shit, man. Ain't nothing better than finally taking out that asshole who's been slapping the crap out of you over and over again.
Deep in the recesses of my brain, a tiny red-hot little flame began to grow.
You Thornton Noble damn bang gunk stinking piss!
But if you're not into a tough challenge, while I do love this game, it may still not be everyone's cup of tea. There is no easy mode here, that's for sure. So now you're starting to get the idea. The amount of actual gameplay depth to this game is top tier. That alone makes it a contender for Game of the Year in my opinion. But I haven't really talked about the story and level design, so let's flip the script for a second. Black Myth Wukong is based on the story Journey to the West. If you didn't know, you're actually not playing as Sun Wukong, you're playing as the Destined One, aka the one destined to essentially replace the role of Sun Wukong. After one of the most badass intros I've seen in a game in a long time, Sun Wukong is defeated by the Celestial Court because of his defiance and unwillingness to relinquish his freedoms and peace. Your journey begins as simple as it can be, and your goal is to recover the 6 relics of Wukong to restore his memory, by those who desire Buddhahood and a place in the Celestial Court. The whole premise of this is freedom of choice, even at the highest level. By the end of it, it really does send a pretty powerful message, so I suggest paying attention. Now I heard a few people having some bugs, and that brings me to the environment. I personally had not run into anything game-breaking, but annoying? Yes. As I mentioned earlier, this game has a lot of secrets and off-the-beaten-path content, and while the environment is breathtaking and seemingly explorable and vast, there are moments where places that look very accessible and just have a wonderful invisible wall. And then there are places where you gotta find secrets and items and you'll think, what the hell, man? This doesn't even make sense. So for me, I had plenty of moments where I would get frustrated by the amount of invisible structures. But I digress. I quickly got over it. And as I said, I had no other bugs or glitches that were game breaking. A few dipped frame rates here and there, but what are you gonna do? And before I wrap this up, I got a few notes and thoughts. 1. If you're curious about obtaining the Platinum Trophy and wonder if it's a pain in the ass, the only question you need to ask yourself is, are you willing, or better yet, wanting to do 2 playthroughs? Some items are only obtained in New Game Plus. I personally already wanted to go another round because I know I missed a lot of stuff, so for me it wasn't bad at all. The worst part is potentially missing some achievement that cannot be attempted again unless you start another playthrough. For example, getting behind this dude and cutting 4 of his arms off for some gauntlets. But other than that, there really isn't much grinding to the achievements, other than a few RNG achievements. And the last thing I want to talk about and get your guys' opinion on is Game of the Year. Do you guys think this is going to be Game of the Year? Or top 3? Or maybe not at all? Let me know in the comments. And let me know what games you guys have played so far this year that you think might be taking that crown. So far for me, Black Myth Wukong deserves the gold, but we still have a quarter of the year left for something to sneak up and take my vote. Let me know what you guys think. And if you guys like this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, especially if you want to see more gaming content like this or game deals in the future. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and as always, happy gaming, and I'll see you guys in the next one.